I woke up choking on thick smoke, only to find my bedroom door jammed and my windows screwed shut. My family wanted me dead for the insurance money, so I survived and set a trap they never saw coming. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The first thing that registered was the oppressive, suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. I was dreaming about swimming in a lake of tar, my limbs heavy and useless, struggling to breach the surface for just a single gasp of clean air. But when I finally forced my heavy eyelids open, the nightmare didn't end. It had bled into reality. My bedroom was entirely engulfed in a thick, rolling darkness. The air was no longer invisible. It was a tangible, acrid entity that clawed at the back of my throat and burned the inside of my nostrils. Smoke. My custom-designed home, the sanctuary I had poured 3 years of architectural freelance work into, was on fire. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded my veins, instantly banishing the grogginess of sleep. I threw off my heavy duvet, my bare feet hitting the heated oak floorboards. Except the floor wasn't just heated by the radiant system I had installed, it was alarmingly hot. The ambient temperature in the room was soaring. "Evelyn! Wyatt!" I screamed, my voice immediately cracking as I inhaled a lungful of toxic, gray soot. I dropped to my hands and knees, remembering the fire safety protocols I had drilled into my own head. The air was marginally clearer down by the baseboards. I crawled frantically toward the heavy, solid-core wooden door that led to the main hallway. Reaching up, I grabbed the brushed brass handle. It was warm, but not searing. I pressed the latch and pulled. Nothing happened. I pulled harder, planting my knee against the doorframe for leverage. The door rattled in its frame, but it held fast. It wasn't locked. It felt as though something heavy and immovable had been wedged directly beneath the handle on the other side. Panic, cold and absolute, began to wrap its icy fingers around my racing heart. "Help! Someone! The door is stuck." I shrieked, pounding my fists against the thick wood until my knuckles bruised. The only answer was the deep, terrifying roar of hungry flames consuming the first floor beneath me. The smoke alarms, the top-of-the-line, hardwired system I had paid thousands of dollars for, were entirely silent. There was no piercing beep, no automated voice warning of fire. Just the crackle of burning drywall and my own ragged, desperate breathing. I spun around, coughing violently, my eyes streaming with involuntary tears. The windows. My bedroom was on the ground floor, facing the sprawling backyard. I had designed those beautiful, oversized casement windows myself. I scrambled across the floor, blindly feeling my way past the edge of my bed and my drafting table, knocking over a cup of expensive pens in the darkness. I reached the window seat, hauled myself up, and fumbled for the heavy metal latch. I turned it, pushing outward with all my remaining strength. The glass pane didn't budge. I pushed again, using my shoulders, my back groaning under the strain. Nothing. Through the glass, illuminated by the eerie, dancing orange glow reflecting off the lawn, I saw the reason. Spaced perfectly along the wooden frame of the window, gleaming maliciously in the firelight, were 4 heavy-duty steel construction screws. They had been driven straight through the sash and into the frame. Fresh wood shavings dusted the sill. My breath hitched. My mind, usually so analytical and structured, completely blanked. Someone had screwed my windows shut from the outside. Then, a movement caught my eye. Standing at the edge of the property line, near the tree line, partially hidden by the shadows, was a figure. Even through the smoke and the distorting glass, I recognized the distinct posture, the way he shoved his hands into the pockets of his designer jacket. Wyatt, my brother. He wasn't running for help. He wasn't holding a hose. He was just standing there, watching my bedroom fill with smoke. I fell back onto the floor, my hand instinctively grabbing my phone from the nightstand where it had been charging. My fingers trembled so violently I could barely input my passcode. I hit the emergency button. 911, what is your emergency? A calm, female voice answered. Fire, I gasped, my vocal cords feeling like shredded paper. My house is on fire. 421 Elmwood Drive, I'm trapped. Okay, ma'am, fire units are already en route. Are you able to exit the building? No, I screamed, a hysterical edge bleeding into my words. The door is blocked. They screwed my windows shut. They want me to die for the insurance money. Wyatt is outside. He's just watching. Ma'am, stay calm. Who is outside? My brother, my mother, and my brother. They trapped me. The smoke was thickening, filling the lower half of the room now. I was running out of time. My architectural background suddenly kicked in, overriding the panic with desperate logic. The HVAC system. I had insisted on oversized return vents for better airflow. There was one right above the baseboard near my closet. I dropped the phone, not bothering to end the call, and threw myself toward the vent. I grabbed my heavy metal T-square from the floor near my desk and jammed it into the vent cover, prying it off with a loud snap. The duct inside was narrow, made of flexible aluminum, but it led straight to the exterior wall. It was my only chance. I squeezed my shoulders in, the sharp metal edges slicing into my arms and back, tearing through my thin pajamas. I shimmied forward, inch by agonizing inch, the heat radiating through the floorboards beneath me, threatening to cook me alive inside the metal tube. I pushed, crying, bleeding, praying, until my hands broke through the exterior grating, tumbling out onto the cold, damp grass of the side yard, completely hidden from Wyatt's view. I lay there, gasping in huge, greedy mouthfuls of oxygen, my vision swimming, until the distant, wailing sirens grew deafeningly loud, and the world faded to black. When I finally opened my eyes again, the world was a blur of sterile white and the rhythmic, annoying beep of a heart monitor. The smell of smoke was gone, replaced by the sharp, chemical sting of hospital-grade antiseptic. My throat felt like it was lined with shattered glass, and my arms were wrapped tightly in thick, white bandages. "Ms. Williams?" a deep, gravelly voice asked. I turned my head, wincing at the stiffness in my neck. A man in a dark suit, holding a silver badge, was standing at the foot of my bed. He had sharp, observant eyes that didn't miss the way I flinched. "I'm Carter," he said gently. "Fire investigator. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened tonight, Amelia." I swallowed hard, reaching for the plastic cup of water with a trembling, bandaged hand. "My house. The structure is severely damaged but standing," Carter said, pulling up a chair and sitting down heavily. "But that's not why I'm here. I listened to the 911 dispatch tape, Amelia. The dispatcher recorded everything you screamed before you dropped the phone." He leaned forward, his expression darkening with a mixture of professional grimness and personal sympathy. "We found the steel screws in the window frames, fresh drill marks. We found the heavy oak dresser shoved against your bedroom door, and we found something else." I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs, a sickening knot forming in my stomach. "We found a newly finalized multi-million-dollar life insurance policy in your name," Carter stated, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The sole beneficiaries are Evelyn and Wyatt, your mother and your brother." I closed my eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking a hot path down my soot-stained cheek. The fire had scorched my skin and lungs, but knowing my own mother and brother struck the match. That betrayal burned infinitely hotter than the flames themselves. The physical pain of the burns on my arms and the raw, scraping agony in my lungs were nothing compared to the psychological whiplash I was currently enduring. I lay perfectly still in the sterile, overly bright hospital bed, staring at the drop ceiling tiles, trying to process the magnitude of what Carter had just told me. My mother. My brother, the two people I had spent the last decade trying to save from their own disastrous life choices. I had built that house. I had designed every single room, every hallway, every window frame, and they had used my own creation as a trap to execute me. "Amelia, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Carter had said just before he left, his sharp eyes locked onto mine. "They don't know that we know. They don't know you made that 911 call. They think the phone melted in the fire before you could speak. When they come in here, you cannot let them know that you know the truth. You must play the traumatized victim. Can you do that?" I had nodded, though I wasn't sure I had the strength to look into their faces without screaming until my throat bled. Less than an hour later, the heavy wooden door to my hospital room swung open. "Oh, my baby, my sweet, precious girl." The wail was theatrical, loud enough to echo down the hallway and draw the sympathetic eyes of the nursing staff. Evelyn burst into the room, her face a mask of perfectly constructed devastation. She was wearing a tasteful, dark cashmere sweater and minimal makeup, looking exactly like a respectable upper-middle-class mother who had just endured the worst night of her life. She rushed to the side of my bed, her hands hovering over my bandaged arms as if she were terrified to touch me, tears streaming down her cheeks in heavy, practiced rivulets. "Amelia, thank God. Thank God you're alive." She sobbed, burying her face into the edge of my mattress. Behind her, shuffling his feet and looking distinctly uncomfortable, was Wyatt. He was wearing the same designer jacket I had seen him wearing on the lawn while he watched my bedroom burn. He smelled faintly of expensive cologne, likely applied in the hospital bathroom to mask any lingering scent of gasoline or smoke. "Hey, Ames," Wyatt mumbled, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. "Man, we thought we lost you. It was crazy. The smoke. We couldn't get to you." I forced my eyes to widen, injecting every ounce of confusion and trauma I could muster into my expression. I looked at Evelyn, who was now dabbing her eyes with a perfectly white tissue. "Mom," I rasped, my voice genuinely weak and broken. "What? What happened? I woke up and there was so much smoke. The door wouldn't open. I couldn't get out." Evelyn's eyes flashed for a fraction of a millisecond. A tiny, involuntary micro-expression of absolute panic, before she smoothed it over with maternal grief. "The fireman said the door frame must have warped from the intense heat, darling," Evelyn said smoothly, her voice a comforting purr. "And the smoke alarms. Oh, it's a tragedy, simply a tragedy. They malfunctioned. The investigators said the wiring must have been faulty. We tried, Amelia. We pounded on the walls, we screamed your name, but the flames in the hallway were just too high. We barely made it out ourselves." I watched her lie. I watched her look me directly in the eyes, her hand now resting gently on my unburned shoulder, and lie about trying to save my life after she had shoved a solid oak dresser against my door to ensure I couldn't escape. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed, every shred of self-control I had cultivated in my years of high-pressure architectural negotiations, not to leap out of the bed and wrap my hands around her throat. "The windows," I whispered, letting my eyes drift around the room as if I were struggling to recall the memory. I tried to open the windows. Wyatt shifted his weight nervously, the sole of his expensive leather shoe squeaking loudly against the linoleum floor. He glanced quickly at his mother. "The heat, Ames," Wyatt interjected quickly, his tone overly loud and slightly defensive. "The fire chief said the heat probably melted the weather stripping, sealed the frames shut. It happens all the time in these big, modern houses. You made them too airtight." He was blaming my architectural design for my near-death experience. The sheer audacity of it made a dark, hysterical laugh bubble up in my chest, which I quickly disguised as a violent, painful coughing fit. Evelyn immediately poured a cup of water, holding the straw to my lips with the trembling hands of a devoted caregiver. "Don't talk, sweetheart," Evelyn cooed, brushing a stray lock of soot-stained hair from my forehead. "Don't try to remember. It's too traumatic. All that matters is that you're safe. The house is a loss, yes, but things can be replaced. You can't. We'll take care of everything. We'll handle the insurance adjusters, the paperwork, everything. You just rest." Ah, there it was, the insurance, the millions of dollars she thought she was about to collect. She couldn't even wait 24 hours before bringing up the payout. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered, forcing a look of profound gratitude onto my face. "I don't know what I would do without you guys." They stayed for another 20 minutes. Evelyn put on a masterful performance for the attending doctor, asking detailed questions about my recovery timeline, her face a portrait of maternal concern. Wyatt mostly stayed near the window, checking his phone obsessively. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was checking his messages from the underground bookies he owed money to, likely assuring them that a massive payday was just around the corner. Finally, they announced they needed to leave to speak with the Red Cross about temporary housing, since our home was currently a crime scene. "We love you, Amelia," Evelyn said, leaning down to press a kiss to my forehead. Her perfume, a cloying, heavy floral scent, made my stomach violently churn. "We'll be back first thing in the morning." "Rest up, Ames," Wyatt added, giving me a half-hearted wave before following his mother out the door. I lay in the silence of the hospital room, the heavy wooden door clicking shut behind them. The performance was over. They had played their parts flawlessly. They genuinely believed they had gotten away with it. They believed the fire had destroyed all the evidence, that the alarms had miraculously failed, and that I was just a naive, traumatized victim who had luckily escaped through a vent. They thought they had committed the perfect crime, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. I wasn't just a daughter or a sister, I was the architect of that house. I knew every wire, every camera blind spot, every structural beam, and every hidden secret of that property. And as I stared at the closed door, the victim inside me died, and a strategist was born. To truly understand the depth of this betrayal, one had to understand the parasitic nature of my family dynamic. For as long as I could remember, I had been the designated life raft in a sea of their self-inflicted crises. Evelyn was not a mother in the traditional sense. She was a professional socialite, a woman who treated her life like a stage play where she was the perpetual, long-suffering star. She didn't have a job. Instead, she had a vocation. She was the chairwoman of half a dozen local committees, the head of the neighborhood watch, the organizer of charity bake sales. She dressed in immaculate pastel blazers, wore her hair in a severe, expensive bob, and projected an aura of unshakable moral superiority to anyone who would listen. But behind closed doors, Evelyn was a financial black hole. Her charity galas and community status were funded entirely by a revolving door of maxed-out credit cards and predatory personal loans. She believed she was entitled to a life of luxury simply by virtue of existing, and she viewed anyone with money as a resource to be tapped. And then there was Wyatt. At 30 years old, my brother had never held a job for longer than 6 months. He was the classic golden child, the handsome, charming boy who could do no wrong in Evelyn's eyes. When Wyatt failed out of college, Evelyn blamed the professors. When Wyatt got fired from a prestigious internship I had secured for him, Evelyn blamed the toxic corporate culture. But the real toxicity was Wyatt's addiction. He was a gambler. Not the glamorous, casino-hopping kind, but the grim, desperate kind who owed dangerous amounts of money to men who didn't send collection letters in the mail. I was the exact opposite. Driven by a deep-seated terror of ending up like them, I had thrown myself into my education and my career. I started my own freelance architectural firm at 26. By 32, I was designing multi-million-dollar custom homes for tech executives and wealthy developers. I was disciplined, frugal, and highly successful. And naturally, my success made me a target. 6 months ago, the house of cards Evelyn and Wyatt had built finally collapsed. Evelyn's creditors were threatening to put a lien on her townhouse, and Wyatt had shown up at my office with a bruised rib and a split lip, begging for $50,000 to keep his kneecaps intact. Against my better judgment, against the screaming alarms in my own head, I caved. They were my family. I paid off Wyatt's debt. I settled Evelyn's most aggressive accounts. And in a moment of monumental stupidity masquerading as familial duty, I offered them the entire first-floor suite of the massive, custom home I had just finished building for myself on Elmwood Drive. "Just until you get back on your feet," I had told them, handing over the keys. But they didn't want to get back on their feet. They wanted to live in my house. Lying in the hospital bed, the memories of the last few months began to crystallize, forming a horrifyingly clear picture. The subtle comments, the invasive questions. I remembered a Tuesday evening about 3 months prior. I was sitting at the massive marble kitchen island, reviewing blueprints, when Evelyn glided into the room, holding a glass of expensive wine she had pulled from my private cellar. "Amelia, darling," she had said, her tone casually conversational as she leaned against the counter. I was just speaking with Margaret from the Rotary Club. Did you know her daughter passed away unexpectedly last month? Tragic. Aneurysm. That's awful, I had murmured, barely looking up from my laptop. It really is, Evelyn sighed, taking a delicate sip. And it left her husband with nothing but a mountain of debt. It really got me thinking about the future, Amelia. You work so hard. You have this massive mortgage, the business loans. If something, God forbid, were to happen to you, Wyatt and I would be left completely destitute. We'd lose the house. We'd have to assume all your debt. My debt is covered by my corporate structure, Mom, I replied, feeling a prickle of annoyance. You wouldn't be liable. Still, she pressed, her voice taking on that whining, manipulative edge she perfected over decades. It's irresponsible not to have a safety net, a life insurance policy, just something to ensure your family is taken care of. It's what mature, responsible adults do, Amelia. She had harped on it for weeks, every dinner, every passing conversation in the hallway. Wyatt joined in, casually mentioning how stressful my job looked and how you never know what could happen. Eventually, exhausted by the constant nagging and wanting to buy some peace in my own home, I agreed. I allowed Evelyn to set up a meeting with a broker she supposedly knew from her charity work. I signed the paperwork, barely reading it, authorizing a massive policy designed to cover the total value of my estate and then some. I remembered the look on Evelyn's face when I handed the signed documents back to her. Her eyes had gleamed, a sharp, predatory satisfaction flashing across her perfectly powdered features. Thank you, darling, she had purred, tucking the folder into her designer handbag. This brings me so much peace of mind. Peace of mind? I clenched my fists in the hospital sheets, the bandages pulling painfully against my raw skin. She hadn't been securing a safety net. She had been pricing my life. They had moved into my home, eaten my food, slept under my roof, and spent 3 months methodically planning my murder. The polished, disingenuous woman who chaired charity meetings and the spoiled, gambling brother had decided that I was worth more to them dead than alive. The door to my hospital room clicked open, breaking me from my dark reverie. Carter stepped back inside, holding a thick manila folder and a secure tablet. All right, Amelia, Carter said, pulling the chair back up to my bedside. His demeanor had shifted from sympathetic to sharply professional. I've secured the perimeter of the property. The scene is locked down. Evelyn and Wyatt just gave their official statements to the uniformed officers in the lobby. They laid it on thick. They're painting themselves as the heroes who almost died trying to breach your door. I let out a slow, trembling breath, the remnants of the naive, loving daughter burning away completely, leaving only cold, hard steel behind. Carter, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the fake weakness I had used with my mother. I want to see the photos of the drill marks. I want to hear the audio tape. And then, I need you to help me build a case so watertight that neither of them will ever see the outside of a prison cell again. Carter sat back in his chair, his eyes locked onto mine, waiting for my next move. The silence in the hospital room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the machinery monitoring my vitals. For a long time, I just stared at the stark white blanket covering my legs. The shattered, grieving daughter was officially gone. In her place, a cold, calculating architect began to draft a new blueprint, one designed for absolute ruin. They think they burned the evidence, Carter, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a newfound, steely resolve. They think the hardwired smoke alarms failed because the fire melted the main electrical panel in the hallway. They think the security cameras I installed outside were destroyed when the roof partially collapsed on the east wing. Carter leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, a pen poised over his small notebook. And were they? I allowed a tight, humorless smile to touch the corners of my mouth. I design houses for billionaires and tech executives, Carter, people who value security above aesthetics. When I built my own home, I didn't just wire it to a standard cloud server. I built a secondary, localized closed-circuit system. Carter's eyebrows shot up. A localized system, where? Underneath the foundation of the house, I explained, the technical details sharpening my focus and pushing the physical pain to the background. There is a subterranean utility vault. It's encased in 10 inches of reinforced concrete and lined with a commercial-grade fire retardant barrier. It houses the backup generator, the HVAC central routing, and a physical server rack that records every single sensor, every alarm trigger, and every camera feed in real time. Carter let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief. You built a fireproof black box for your house. Exactly, I nodded, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at the burns on my neck. Evelyn and Wyatt don't know it exists. They have no idea how smart home architecture actually works. They thought cutting the primary power and smashing the hallway panel would render the house blind and deaf. But that black box was recording everything on its own independent battery supply. Carter stood up abruptly, his professional demeanor charged with electricity. If that server survived the heat and the water damage from the fire hoses. It survived, I said with absolute certainty. It's rated to withstand temperatures up to 2,000 degrees for 4 hours. You need to send your forensics team into the basement. Look for a steel hatch concealed beneath the slate tiles in the wine cellar. The code to the biometric lock is my birth date backwards. Bring me those drives. Consider it done, Carter said, already reaching for his radio. But before he could key the microphone, I stopped him. Wait, I said, my tone hardening. We need more than just the footage of the fire. If we want to establish premeditation and secure a conviction that will put them away forever, we need to uncover their motive. We need to prove why they did this. The life insurance policy is a pretty massive motive, Amelia, Carter pointed out gently. It's the prize, not the catalyst, I countered, my mind racing through the last 6 months of their manipulative behavior. Wyatt owes dangerous people a lot of money. I know that for a fact, but Evelyn is hiding something deeper. She doesn't just want wealth, she's running from something. I want you to look into her finances. Not just her credit cards, but the Rotary Club accounts, her charity bake sales, the neighborhood watch funds. Dig into every single penny she has touched in the last 5 years. Over the next 48 hours, my hospital room transformed from a place of recovery into a heavily guarded war room. Carter enlisted the help of a forensic accountant and a private investigator he trusted implicitly. Because my room was listed under an alias to protect me from the press, we worked in absolute secrecy. The first piece of leverage arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Carter walked in, his face grim, holding a thick, encrypted tablet. We pulled the server from the basement vault, he announced, locking the heavy door behind him. It was pristine. Not a single byte of data was corrupted. He placed the tablet on my tray table and tapped the screen. The high-definition video feed from the backyard camera flared to life. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. on the night of the fire. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the black-and-white infrared footage. There was Wyatt creeping across the lawn. He was carrying a cordless power drill and a small box. I watched, my stomach violently churning with a sickening mixture of horror and vindication, as my own brother systematically drove 3-inch steel construction screws into the frame of my bedroom window. We have him, Carter said quietly. Clear as day. Destruction of property, attempted murder, arson. Keep digging, I commanded, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I want the financial reports on Evelyn. I want to know exactly what kind of monster raised me. The opportunity for my first strategic strike presented itself the very next morning. Evelyn and Wyatt arrived during visiting hours, carrying a massive bouquet of expensive lilies and wearing expressions of profound, exhausting grief. Evelyn was dressed in head-to-toe black, looking as though she were already preparing for my funeral, while Wyatt trailed behind her, aggressively chewing on his thumbnail, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Amelia, my darling, Evelyn cooed, sweeping into the room and placing the lilies on the windowsill. You are looking a little better today. The color is coming back to your cheeks. I'm feeling a bit stronger, Mom, I lied, keeping my voice soft and raspy. I adjusted the bed to sit up slightly, ensuring I had a clear view of both their faces. I actually had a very productive morning. I had the nurses help me make a few phone calls. Wyatt stopped chewing his nail. Evelyn froze, her hand hovering over a vase of water. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Phone calls. Evelyn asked, her voice tight, the comforting maternal purr momentarily vanishing. To whom, sweetheart? You really shouldn't be stressing yourself with outside matters. To my attorney, I said casually, letting the words hang in the sterile air. Wyatt actually took a physical step backward, bumping into a heart monitor. Evelyn's posture went completely rigid, her eyes narrowing into tiny, terrified slits. Your attorney, Evelyn repeated, forcing a hollow, high-pitched laugh that sounded more like a panicked bird. Whatever for, Amelia. I told you, Wyatt and I are handling all the insurance paperwork. We submitted the claim for the life insurance policy and the property damage just yesterday to get the ball rolling. We want to make sure your medical bills are covered. I know you did, Mom, and I appreciate it, I said, delivering my first calculated blow with surgical precision. But there's a slight complication. You see, when I set up that life insurance policy you recommended, I didn't list you and Wyatt as the direct beneficiaries. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second amplifying the rising panic in their eyes. What? What do you mean? Wyatt stammered, his face draining of all color. Mom said we were the beneficiaries. I told her you were, to give her peace of mind. I continued calmly, watching Evelyn's carefully constructed mask begin to fracture. But legally, the policy pays out directly to a blind, irrevocable corporate trust I established for my architectural firm. It's an asset protection strategy. Evelyn gripped the edge of my bedrail, her knuckles turning stark white. A trust? Amelia, what does that mean? It means, I said, staring directly into my mother's eyes, that no individual can access those funds. Not even me, while the investigation is ongoing. The insurance company's forensic auditors have to clear the fire of any foul play before a single dime is released to the trust. And even then, the trust only distributes funds to approved corporate vendors. It doesn't pay out personal cash. Evelyn's face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The grieving mother act instantly vaporized, replaced by the selfish, desperate woman she truly was. You lied to me, she hissed, her voice dropping into a harsh, vicious register I hadn't heard since I was a child. You let me believe we were protected. You selfish, ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea the position you've put us in? Mom, chill out, Wyatt whispered frantically, looking terrified by her sudden outburst. Shut up, Wyatt. Evelyn snapped, whirling on him before turning her venomous glare back to me. I am your mother. I am entitled to that money. I have bills, Amelia. We have expenses. We lost all our belongings in that fire, too. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, projecting an air of helpless innocence. I thought you just wanted me to have a safety net. I didn't realize you needed the cash immediately. Evelyn began to pace the floor, her breathing heavy and ragged. She was cornered, her massive payday snatched away, her debts still looming. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me. I will call my own lawyers, Evelyn threatened, her voice shaking with rage and poorly concealed panic. I will have you declared mentally unfit due to trauma. I will file for immediate power of attorney. I am your next of kin, Amelia, and I will not let you hoard this money while your family suffers. She grabbed her designer purse from the chair and stormed toward the door. Come, Wyatt, we have work to do. Wyatt looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter confusion, before scurrying out the door behind his mother. As the door clicked shut, Carter stepped out from the adjoining private bathroom, where he had been silently listening to the entire exchange. Well, Carter said softly, writing something down in his notebook. I'd say you definitely hit a nerve. She practically confessed to needing the money right now. She's desperate, I said, feeling a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. And desperate people make mistakes. What did the financial investigator find? Carter pulled up a chair and opened his encrypted tablet once more. His expression was graver than I had ever seen it. Your mother isn't just desperate, Amelia, Carter said, his voice deadly serious. She's a seasoned predator. The forensic accountant dug into her community accounts. Over the last 5 years, Evelyn has embezzled nearly $400,000 from the local Rotary Club, the Neighborhood Watch, and the Children's Hospital charity fund she chairs. I closed my eyes, a wave of profound nausea washing over me. Embezzling from a children's charity. There truly was no bottom to her depravity. She's been cooking the books, moving small amounts into offshore accounts, and using the funds to pay minimum balances on her massive credit card debts, Carter continued. But the walls were closing in. The Rotary Club scheduled an independent audit for next month. If she didn't replace that money, she was facing federal wire fraud charges and a guaranteed prison sentence. So she needed my life insurance payout to cover her theft, I whispered, the final puzzle piece locking into place. She wasn't just being greedy. She was trying to save herself from federal prison. Exactly, Carter confirmed. And Wyatt's gambling debts are worse than you thought. He owes roughly $150,000 to a syndicate operating out of the city. They gave him a deadline of this Friday. Hence, the rushed, sloppy execution of the fire. The sheer scale of their deception was breathtaking. They had orchestrated my brutal murder simply to balance their checkbooks. But here is the most important part, Carter said, pulling up an audio file on his tablet. This is a recording we recovered from your basement server. It's an ambient audio recording from the kitchen smart speaker, captured the afternoon before the fire. He pressed play. The familiar, high-fidelity sound of my own kitchen filled the hospital room. I'm telling you, it's too risky, Mom. What if she wakes up? What if the windows don't hold? Wyatt's voice echoed, frantic and trembling. She won't wake up. The smoke will put her to sleep long before the flames reach the door, Evelyn's voice replied, cold, calculated, and devoid of any human empathy. You just make sure those screws are tight. If she gets out, Wyatt, those men will break your legs and throw you in the river. This is the only way. There was a long pause on the recording. I can't believe we're doing this, Wyatt muttered. Then came the phrase that changed everything. Evelyn's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. We aren't doing anything, Wyatt. You are. I will be asleep in the guest room. If anything goes wrong, if the investigators get suspicious. Well, you have a documented history of severe gambling debts and desperate behavior. I am simply a grieving mother. Do you understand me? You take the risk, or you face the syndicate alone. The recording clicked off. I stared at Carter, utterly stunned. Evelyn hadn't just manipulated Wyatt into helping her commit murder. She had systematically set him up to be the sole fall guy if they got caught. She had planned to throw her own son under the bus to save herself. She's a monster, I breathed. She is, Carter agreed, and she's escalating. Our undercover officers just reported that Evelyn is organizing a community vigil and medical fundraiser for you tomorrow evening at the town hall. She's claiming your insurance is tied up in bureaucratic red tape, and she needs immediate cash donations from the community to cover your life-saving surgeries. She's using my tragedy to steal from the same community she's already embezzling from, I said, my blood boiling. She wants a quick cash grab before the Rotary audit. We have enough to arrest her right now, Amelia, Carter said, placing a hand gently on my arm. We have the drill footage. We have the audio. We can end this. No, I said, my voice hardening into absolute, unbreakable steel. If we arrest her quietly, she will spin it. She'll play the victim to the press. She'll claim she was framed. I want her to face the people she's been lying to. I want her completely, utterly destroyed in public. Before Carter could respond, a soft, hesitant knock sounded at my hospital door. We both froze. Carter quietly slipped into the bathroom, leaving the door cracked open. Come in, I called out. The door opened slowly and Wyatt slipped inside. He looked completely unraveled. He was sweating profusely, his eyes darting wildly, his clothes disheveled. He looked exactly like a man who knew he was running out of time. Ames, he whispered, rushing to my bedside, his voice cracking. Ames, I need to talk to you. I'm so scared. He was the manipulated loved one. A weak, foolish man, yes, but entirely under the hypnotic, toxic control of our mother. What is it, Wyatt? I asked, dropping the weak act and staring at him with calm, piercing authority. Mom, she's losing her mind, Wyatt stammered, gripping the bedrail. She's demanding I sign papers giving her control of my bank accounts before the fundraiser tomorrow. She's acting crazy. Ames, I don't know what to do. The guys I owe money to. They've been texting me. If we don't get that insurance money. I let him ramble for another 30 seconds, watching him drown in his own guilt and fear. Then, I reached out with my unbandaged hand and grabbed his wrist, squeezing it tightly. Wyatt, I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a knife. Stop talking and listen to me. He froze, startled by the commanding tone in my voice. You aren't going to get a dime of that insurance money, I said coldly, and neither is Evelyn. But you said the trust. There is no trust complication, I stated, watching his eyes widen in terror. I'm not protecting the money from the insurance company, Wyatt. I'm protecting it from you. I know about the fire. I know about the door. I know about the screws. Wyatt's jaw dropped open. He tried to pull his arm away, but I held on with surprising strength. Ames, no, we tried to save you. I have the 911 dispatch recording, I pressed on, relentlessly breaking down his defenses. I have the security footage of you drilling my windows shut from my underground server. I know everything. Wyatt collapsed to his knees beside my bed, burying his face in his hands, releasing a guttural sob of absolute despair. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She made me do it, Ames. She said it was the only way. She said you wouldn't feel a thing. She lied to you, Wyatt, I said, leaning closer, delivering the final, shattering blow. She manipulated you into doing the dirty work. And do you want to know what her backup plan was? I reached over to my tray table, picked up Carter's tablet, and hit play on the audio file. Wyatt knelt there, trembling violently as he listened to his mother's cold, calculating voice plotting to frame him entirely. He listened as the woman he had blindly followed, the woman he had tried to murder his own sister for, casually discussed throwing him to the police or the mob to save her own skin. When the recording ended, Wyatt slowly lifted his head. His eyes, previously filled with panic and confusion, were now hollow and dark with a devastating realization. The spell was broken. His loyalty to Evelyn shattered into a million irreparable pieces right in front of me. She was going to let me take the fall, Wyatt whispered, his voice completely dead. She still is, I replied. Tomorrow night at the fundraiser. She's going to take the cash and run, leaving you to face the police and the syndicate. Unless, of course, you help me stop her. Wyatt looked at me, tears streaming down his face, and nodded slowly. What do you want me to do? The Oakwood Town Hall was draped in artificial mourning. Lavender ribbons and white lilies, Evelyn's signature touch, adorned the heavy oak podium. The room was packed with the town's elite, Rotary Club members, local business owners, and neighbors I had known since childhood. They spoke in hushed, reverent tones, clutching glasses of punch, and looking toward the stage where a large, framed photograph of me sat draped in black silk. Evelyn stood center stage, a vision of tragic grace. She wore a modest charcoal suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, her eyes artfully rimmed with just enough redness to suggest sleepless nights of prayer. Beside her stood a large plexiglass donation box, already half full of checks and thick envelopes of cash. Friends, neighbors, Evelyn's voice wafted over the microphone, trembling with a practiced, melodic sorrow. As many of you know, my brave daughter Amelia is still fighting for her life in the burn unit. The doctors say it's a miracle she survived that faulty wiring fire. But the road to recovery is long, and as a mother, it breaks my heart to say that her insurance company is being difficult. They are questioning the very home she built with her own hands. A sympathetic murmur rippled through the crowd. I watched from the darkened wings of the stage, seated in a wheelchair, hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain. Carter stood behind me, his hand resting reassuringly on the handle. Wyatt stood to my left, trembling, his face ghostly pale. I am not a woman who asks for handouts, Evelyn continued, dabbing her eye with a lace handkerchief. But for Amelia's surgeries, for her future, I am swallowing my pride. Every dollar you give tonight goes directly to her care. Is that right, Mother? I signaled Carter, and he pushed my wheelchair out from behind the curtain directly into the spotlight. The collective gasp from the audience was deafening. People dropped their glasses, chairs scraped loudly against the floor. Evelyn froze, her hand still holding the handkerchief to her eye. Her jaw didn't just drop, it seemed to unhinge. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Amelia! Someone screamed from the front row. She's here. I looked horrific, and I knew it. My arms were heavily bandaged. A gauze wrap circled my neck, and the hospital gown was only partially obscured by a heavy coat. But my eyes were clear, and my voice, amplified by the secondary microphone Carter had clipped to my lapel, was steady. "You look surprised to see me, Mom," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. "I thought you said the doctors were worried I wouldn't make it through the night." Evelyn scrambled to regain her composure, her eyes darting frantically toward the exits, only to see uniformed officers quietly stepping into place at every door. "Amelia, darling, you shouldn't be out of bed. You're delirious from the medication." "I'm not delirious," I said, turning my wheelchair to face the crowd. "I'm the victim of an attempted murder." The room went deathly silent. "The fire at 421 Elmwood wasn't caused by faulty wiring," I stated, my voice ringing with architectural precision. "It was arson, and I wasn't trapped by warped wood." My bedroom door was barricaded with a dresser, and my windows were screwed shut from the outside with 3-inch steel construction screws. Evelyn lunged for the microphone, her face contorting into a snarl. "She's confused. The trauma." "Show them, Wyatt," I commanded. Wyatt stepped forward into the light. He looked at the mother who had planned to betray him, and for the first time in his life, he didn't flinch. He pulled a small remote from his pocket and pressed a button. The massive projector screen behind the podium, usually used for town council presentations, flared to life. It wasn't a slideshow of my life. It was the high-definition infrared footage from the basement server. The entire room watched in horrified silence as Wyatt, clearly identifiable, drilled the screws into my window. "I did it," Wyatt shouted over the gasps of the crowd, his voice cracking with a mixture of shame and liberation. "I did it because she told me to. She said Amelia was worth $3 million dead. She said she'd frame me if I didn't help her." "You're lying," Evelyn shrieked, her voice hitting a manic, glass-shattering register. "He's a gambler, he's a thief. He did this on his own." "Then explain this, Evelyn," I said, as the audio recording from the kitchen began to play over the hall's professional sound system. "She won't wake up. The smoke will put her to sleep. You take the risk, or you face the syndicate alone." The recording played to the very end, the part where Evelyn explicitly detailed how she would use Wyatt as her fall guy. The reaction was instantaneous. The community members, the people Evelyn had groomed and lied to for years, recoiled in physical disgust. Margaret, the woman whose daughter's death Evelyn had used as a prop, stood up and threw her drink toward the stage. "You monster," Margaret cried. Evelyn backed away from the podium, her heels clicking frantically on the wood. She reached for the plexiglass donation box, trying to heave it off the table to take the cash with her, but Carter was faster. He stepped forward, his badge gleaming under the stage lights. "Evelyn Williams, you are under arrest for attempted first-degree murder, aggravated arson, and insurance fraud," Carter said, his voice booming. "And based on the evidence we've gathered this morning, we're adding multiple counts of federal wire fraud and embezzlement." As the handcuffs clicked shut around Evelyn's wrists, she didn't cry. She didn't plead. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical weight. "I should have used more screws," she spat. The crowd erupted in jeers as she was led away in front of everyone she had ever sought to impress. Her perfect life, her social standing, and her freedom were gone in a single, devastating stroke of justice. The aftermath of the fire was a long, grueling process, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family on my back. Evelyn was denied bail. The evidence from the black box server, combined with the 911 recording and the forensic audit of the charity accounts, was insurmountable. Faced with the mountain of proof, she eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, resulting in a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. She transitioned from the queen of the Rotary Club to an inmate in a high-security women's facility, where her charm and pastel blazers meant absolutely nothing. Wyatt's path was more complicated. Because he had cooperated fully, provided the testimony needed to bury Evelyn, and was clearly under her psychological duress, he received a significantly reduced sentence for his role in the arson. He is currently serving 10 years with a mandatory gambling addiction program. I visit him once a month. We don't talk about the money or the house, we talk about healing. For the first time, he is taking responsibility for his own life. As for me, I didn't just rebuild my house, I redesigned my life. I used the insurance payout, which was eventually released after the investigation cleared me of any involvement, to establish a foundation for victims of elder and familial financial abuse. I hired a team of forensic accountants to help others who are being bled dry by the people they are supposed to trust. A year after the fire, I stood on the back deck of my new home. It looks much like the old one, but the windows are different. They are large, beautiful, and they open with the slightest touch, letting in the sweet, cool air of the evening.